I want all of our kids to be self-motivated. I want them to find their own paths. And this culture, we can talk about this in more detail if you want. This culture has conditioned us as parents and kids to believe that there's this one right path in your life. You study hard, you get straight A's, you go to a top college, you need to get a good job, you need to make a lot of money. That's the line we've set for kids, which isn't the line that everybody has to follow, right?
A strong girl. What does that mean to you? Because a lot of your messaging, I would say almost all of your messaging is around, raising a strong girl to become a strong, independent woman. But what does strong mean to you?
It's one of the best things you can do to ensure that you will be an influence in her life now through the teen years and beyond. I would spend special time with her. I'd create some rituals that you do together. It's really easy to do things with a 3-year-old. It's easy to start rituals when your kid is 8. Sometimes if you introduce that when they're 16 or 17, it's a little bit harder sell, perhaps.
Your messaging is really about, raising strong girls. And when you mentioned the overload and trying to tackle that before it gets to the anxiety or a diagnosis, it makes me think of my daughter who, like I said, is 3 years old. So if there's someone like me who wants to put in the solid foundation, whether it's our family values or the way we handle conflict in our family or just the values we try to put into our kids, how can we essentially develop our daughter to avoid that overload or to be able to handle the stressors that are inevitably going to come later in life?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a lot to unpack, but just a couple things, a couple highlights. One of them is we encourage parents to. Did you ever read Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
Maybe some of it. I've maybe some of it.
Yeah, it was on the bestseller list for like 100 years. But one of his first habits was to begin with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind. And so we encourage parents to sit down and talk to each other and say, what's our end in mind? We gave a talk yesterday to a group of parents, and we had them close their eyes and visualize their kids coming to them all grown up, like they're 30 years of age. And we said, what kind of people do you want them to be? What's important? So then we made a list of things like honest, high integrity, kind, loving, independent, motivated, ambitious, contented. We made a nice list. And I tell the parents after we make the list, and we've done that list, by the way, in 17 different countries and all over the U.S. So all kinds of people. And never on the list have we seen straight A's or attending a top college or winning a national championship at the age of 8 on their club team. But I say, where's our energy go? Where does a lot of our energy go? It's those kinds of things. So it's nice at the beginning, as parents, or if your kids are old enough, they're older, to invite them in on the conversation. What do we value? What's important to us? So that's one thing, is that you and your spouse, if you have one, you can sit down and say, what's our end in mind? And so we can start using that to drive our decisions. So when your daughter gets a little older and there's a decision, she's playing soccer in the fall, and then she also is been asked to also be on a volleyball team or some other activities. If you have decided as a family, we want more downtime, time alone at home, we're all together and hanging out, then the answer would be no. If you're going by what everybody else is doing, the answer is yes, and all of a sudden, everybody's stressed out. So one thing is I would begin with the end in mind. I'd become a great listener. Not that you're not, but I would make sure you're a great non-judgmental listener who just listens and doesn't go quickly to advice or fixing or rescuing. You just want to let her know that if you come to us, we will try and get in your shoes and see it from your point of view. It doesn't mean we necessarily agree all the time, but we'll mirror back what we think you're saying until you know we got it. We see you, we hear you, we understand. That's a huge gift for anybody. And also, that's one of the best things that you can do, you and her mom. It's one of the best things you can do to ensure that you will be an influence in her life now through the teen years and beyond. I would spend special time with her. I'd create some rituals that you do together. It's really easy to do things with a 3-year-old. It's easy to start rituals when your kid is 8. Sometimes if you introduce that when they're 16 or 17, it's a little bit harder sell, perhaps. But if you can establish some things that you do together that become things just for her and her dad, for instance, I think that that allows you the time when, if she wants to talk about something, she knows you're there. I'd make sure you have that long tuck-ins every night, not just when she's 3, but when she's 13, when she's 16. They're never too old for that. I promise you, I've worked with teenage girls for a long time. They're never too old for that. And also, one last thing, I could go on forever. One last thing, which is really important to me, I'm very passionate about this, is I want all of our kids to be self-motivated. I want them to find their own paths. And this culture, we can talk about this in more detail if you want. This culture has conditioned us as parents and kids to believe that there's this one right path in your life. You study hard, you get straight A's, you go to a top college, you need to get a good job, you need to make a lot of money. That's the line we've set for kids, which isn't the line that everybody has to follow, right? But there's a lot of pressure on kids to do that. And so a lot of kids will follow that path because they want to please us. They don't want to disappoint us. Everybody else is doing it. So there's a good question you can ask her all along the way, even at age 3. If she walks up to you with a little piece of paper, she's colored something. It's really easy to go, "Oh, that's so beautiful. I love your drawings. You're so great." And I always teach parents, a better question might be, "What do you like about your picture?" And when she's in first grade and she plays soccer and she's out there having fun and you're talking to her, I'd say, "What do you like about soccer? What do you like so much about going to dance? Why do you like that so much? I notice how excited you get. What do you like about drawing? What do you like about reading?" You start to help kids learn to identify what's the feeling I get from doing these things I love to do. That is my intrinsic internal motivation, which is always there and will always be there. I'm not always going to have my mommy and daddy there patting me on the back and pumping me up and praising me and encouraging me. I need to learn to find my own motivation for things. So all along the way, you can get them to look inside and then get a sense of, what does this mean to me? When I see high school girls in my office a lot of times, I'll ask them, "What kind of grades do you want to get in school?" And then they'll look at me like I'm an idiot and they'll say, "Well, A's," right? And I go, "Why do you want A's?" And then I get one of 2 answers typically. One answer is that line, "Well, so I can get into a good college and get a good job, make a lot of money." That's one line of that's their answer. But most of the girls look at me and they go, "Well, I," and they kind of stammer, and then they don't have an answer because nobody's asked them, "Why do you want to get those kind of grades? Why do you want to play soccer?" I also ask them, "Do you have any idea what you want to do after high school?" And many of them will go, "Well, I'm going to go to college." And I'll say, "Why do you want to go to college?" I get the same answer. Most of them don't have an answer because they haven't learned to think for themselves. So if you want your daughter to be happy and fulfilled and powerful and confident, all those things, I think that's one of the main things you can do for her as well.
So you mentioned a couple of really, really interesting things. So I made a few notes to come back to, but while we're on the topic of raising a strong girl with strong values, that's an independent thinker. When you say a strong girl, what does that mean to you? Because a lot of your messaging, I would say almost all of your messaging is around, raising a strong girl to become a strong, independent woman. But what does strong mean to you?
Well, that's a good question. It can mean a lot of things. My last book that I published about a year ago was called She Leads. It's about how do you raise a leader. And being a leader doesn't mean you're necessarily a CEO of a company. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be the first woman president of the United States, although that would be nice. It's more like, are you in charge of your life? Do you know yourself? Are you comfortable with who you are? Do you make good decisions for yourself? Do you trust yourself? So do you trust your intuition as opposed to doing what everybody else is doing or what you think you should be doing? Are you self-motivated? Can you set boundaries and take care of yourself? Can you speak up and ask for what you want and get your needs met? Can you advocate for yourself? Are you in charge of your life? And are you even in charge of what success means to you? Right? The culture's definition of success is you get this great job and you're leaning in and going to the top of your career ladder and then making a lot of money. That's kind of like the culture's definition of success. But what is your definition? What do you want? What would it mean to you? If I ask girls, and I've done this not a million times, I've done this hundreds of times. If I ask a room full of girls, who are the heroes in our culture? They say the same things: first responders, soldiers, professional athletes. I say, okay, but what they don't identify is a woman who goes into a field where there aren't very many women. They don't talk about a teacher who's working in an inner city. They don't talk about a nurse who was on the front lines when the COVID thing hit, or a doctor. They don't talk about those people who, in my mind, are heroes. We got this in their schools. They'll say the leaders in my school are the student council president, the most popular kid, the captain of the team, the queen bee. Most kids don't fall under that umbrella, and so they don't see themselves as being strong or leaders. And so I want them to widen the definition of what that means. Widen the definition of courage and bravery and leadership. We have this patriarchal old thing, like, you're standing on like President Bush standing on the aircraft carrier saying, mission accomplished, this macho kind of patriarchal kind of masculine model, which is okay. But there's a lot of other qualities that are equally as important that I think our girls aren't getting enough of or hearing enough about or being affirmed for. And I think if we see it in them and we affirm it, they're much more likely to live them out.
How much of that do you think comes from popular culture or media in terms of the, I guess, muddied message of what being a leader really can mean?
I think that's one place it comes from. I also think it comes from biases, stereotypes. It's better than it was, but it's still not as much as it should be. Girls still get a lot of mixed messages. Young girls, high school girls, young women, women in the workforce, there's still a lot of mixed messages out there about, be out there, be strong, but not too much. If I have a group of girls, I've done this a lot in the last 10, 15 years. I'll have a group of girls in like 5th grade, 8th grade, high school, make a list of the qualities of a good girl, the kind of girl that the culture, your parents, teachers, everybody wants you to be. And that list puts things down there like, always kind, always happy, good grades, puts other people's needs first, nurturing. They have all this whole list of things, and they aren't bad things, but then we make a list of the qualities of a bad girl, quote unquote, a bad girl. But there's things on that list that are actually really good things, like doesn't care what other people think and speaks out. And there's things on the good girl list that I don't want girls to put everybody's needs before themselves always. I want them to be of service. I want them to be kind to people, but their needs are also important. So I think girls wrestle a lot with those mixed messages. And I think that's one of the things that causes a lot of angst and also a lot of stress for them.